It's that time for the Lance Wallnau Show, and boy, do we have a lot we're going to cover today. So much is happening, a lot of breaking news. I don't want you to miss it. Many of you have probably already seen. In my community, we're very prophetic. We're into the prophecy that Brandon Briggs had brought out. You know, he had prophesied about, with incredible accuracy, blood on the face of Trump, a shot, that came, that hits his ear, and blood coming down the right side of his face. And then falling down on the ground, and he having an encounter with God. I've been with Trump. He's talked about this experience he had with God, falling down on the ground where he felt God was with him. And but the second part of his prophecy, if the first part is accurate, pay attention to part two. Most people are missing this. Let's play it.
And then I saw him winning the election through the Patriots coming out and voting, and then there will be a great economy crash. Yeah. I saw they had a great economy plan, a crash, worse than the Great Depression. And the Lord warned me about this. It would be a great dark time. But I saw paddles coming upon America's soil like a shocking of the soil. And I saw Donald Trump praying in the office of the Oval Office, and he was weeping before the Lord with his hands on his head like this, but he was weeping. And there was ministers and people. I don't know if they were senators or Congress people or whatever. I just saw them pacing and back and forth inside of the White House. I'm sorry, what is the White House? But it's the Oval Office. Yeah. And they were interceding all inside there, and I could feel the presence of the Lord so strong on this. And then I could see that darkness that was the heaviness upon America with the financial crisis of what I saw coming. It started to lift above the trees, and I saw the blue and the things coming back out, and the green times and the good times coming back again. But the Lord said it would be forth a time of a season of a shaking, and it would be a shaking to awaken. And in this, this would basically that He was not done with America. There would be a great revival come, and it's not all doom and gloom. That's what He said. The sky's not falling. There's a time of, it's like people would say, this is judgment. And the Lord said, do not call this judgment. It's not my judgment. It's a correction. There's correction coming.
In the book of Haggai, the Bible says that God sent an economic shaking to Israel, and He was doing it as a message to them to say, hey, you better be taking seriously my house, because my house is more important than the White House. And so once the election is passed, according to this prophet, there's going to come this economic adjustment. Now, look, this is not a surprise. The economists that I'm working with, we're talking about this all the time. The Democrats and Republicans have irresponsibly passed legislation to increase the debt, to open up the spigot of money so that Wall Street and money's getting floated out there, but that money eventually has to do something, and you're going to see the impact of it is going to be impacting the United States with the inability to handle the debt. And we've been warning about this. And this is why Haggai talks so specifically about God wants to build His house. He uses economic discipline as a way of getting attention on His priorities. And I believe that those priorities are being articulated there. And that's why I tell people, go, even with Haggai, where it says the silver is mine and the gold is mine. God, I think, is giving us a hint that He's saying, store your money in what has value that will sustain itself. And that's why you want to go to lancewallnau.com/gold and at least read the 25-page report on what's happening to the dollar. lancewallnau.com/gold. It'll give you wisdom to navigate and know we're going to come through the future, and it's going to have a blue sky at the end of it. Take action and have peace of mind. Go to lancewallnau.com/gold, and then we're going to go right into this wild clip with the director of the Secret Service.
It's as telling as it is chilling. We have satellite images from the Butler Fairgrounds. Have you visited the site?
No, I have not.
9 days and you have not visited the site. You should have been there that night. Did you talk to, that evening, did you talk to the team, the heroes that surrounded the president? Did you call them that night?
They were still operational work.
So that's an answer is no. Did you call them the next day?
President. Yes, I spoke with them.
You called them the very next day, not the day of, or was it 72 hours after?
I don't know the timeline, but I spoke with them
because you're under oath.
Immediately following.
I think it was 72 hours after. You waited 3 days. What is immediately clear is that there are a number of structures that need to be secured. Of these, Director, other than the first, immediate 4, what's the most dangerous site that should have been secured? Because Security 101, you got to mitigate the high ground.
Yes.
Okay. Do you know what the next most dangerous site, what was the closest structure to the president, other than the 4 immediate ones that you had your counter sniper teams on?
There are a number of structures around that event site.
You know who the shooter knew? The shooter has visited the site 2 more times than you have, and he had a drone, and he picked the AGR building. So you said, do you remember in an ABC interview you did that you didn't have people on the roof of the AGR building because you were worried about safety because of the slope?
I recall that statement.
Okay. Does the Secret Service have written policy you can share with us about slope roofs?
No.
Okay. So why'd you act like there was one? Because is it your practice to comment on enormous events of enormous national implications when you're ignorant of the facts? That's rhetorical. So here's this thing with the slopes. You go all the way up to like 1812. You can go to a 112, which is about as flat as you can get without it being completely flat. And you're saying that there was a danger, safety concern there. But the problem is, Director, you put your counter snipers on a 312 roof, which is steeper than the 112. And by the way, the 112 is ADA compliant. You can build a ramp for a wheelchair on a 112 roof. So these are nothing but pathetic excuses, and they make no sense, and they're a bunch of cow dung. All the law enforcement I've spoken with over the last 9 days are amazed that the AGR rooftop was not secure. And you want to know why? Because it's dangerous. I have never had any long gun training in my life. I own an AR-15, and last time I shot it one time my whole life. It was 6 years ago. That is until Saturday, where we recreated the events in Savoy, Texas, where we recreated what happened in Butler. I was lying prone on a sloped roof at 130 yards at 6:30 at night. And I knew that he had a scope. I didn't know what kind, red dot or magnified. So I shot 8 rounds from both. You know what the result was? 15 out of 16 kill shots. And the one I missed would have hit the president's ear. That's a 94% success rate. And that shooter was a better shot than me. It is a miracle President Trump wasn't killed. Corey Compagnore's life is over because that shooter made it on the roof. And it wasn't the roof that was dangerous. It was a nut job on top of the roof. You know what else is dangerous? I believe your horrifying ineptitude and your lack of skilled leadership is a disgrace. Your obfuscating today is shameful. And you should be fired immediately and go back to Garden Doritos. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
That was, in my opinion, the testimony that took her out. The thing that's interesting is, and here's a lesson. I wonder if anyone else is going to get this. Christopher Wray is one of the masters of this. When you're before the House and you're dealing with a subject of intense interest to the country, do not come off with lawyerese and Washington speak for obfuscating and avoiding accountability or clarity. She should have erred on the side of empathizing with the urgency of owning that this was a screwed up operation and we've got to get to the bottom of it. And I'm going to give you everything I can because this cannot happen again. Let's talk about it as though I'm on your side. This is not right. Versus, I've already made my comment. Well, that's still being investigated. Well, I can't comment on that. It's the FBI's department. Her mistake was she did not come off as though she was trying to help them get clarity in order to avoid an assassination in the future and to set the mind of Americans at ease that this wasn't an inside job. That's where a lot of people are going right now. Am I overstating the obvious there, Mercedes?
I mean, she comes off as so incompetent with no answers and like should go back to guarding Cheetos or Doritos or whatever she's watching. But it's almost like, is she a fall person? Is she the scapegoat? I mean, I'm watching it and I'm like, what is happening? Like she comes off as so inept that it just makes you wonder, is this a scapegoat? Is this a fall guy for a failed, like you're saying, I mean, conspiracy theories out there are saying, hey, it's an assassination attempt. This was, a 3-letter agency trying to take out a presidential candidate. So, I mean, it's wild, the stuff that's online right now.
All right. So the big question that's coming up is the Pennsylvania Police Department, because for some reason there was a handoff of responsibilities within 200 yards of protecting the president. It was like, well, you do the outer perimeter and we'll do the inner perimeter. No, when you're in charge of protecting the president, you own everything within like 300 or 400 feet, which is the effective range of an AR-15. You own that. You don't hand it off to the local police department in Butler County you get engaged with them and you oversee and make sure they're doing their part under your umbrella. This is classic government chaos going on, to the point where the Secret Service didn't even show up for the briefing on the morning of the rally in order to make sure that all of their radio technology was operating the same frequency so that they could all hear each other in real time in the event that there was a report that had to be made, other than somebody embedded with the Secret Service from the police who's interpreting, hopefully to the right person, what the police are giving them as feedback. That's what you're going to find out is going to be maddening when you start getting the results. I want you to hear some of the testimony of the attempted assassination investigation with the Pennsylvania Police Department colonel who wasn't even there. This is classic government stuff here. This is the guy, I wasn't there, but here's our standard policy. So hear this testimony, and it's going to open up the window on what happened with the window that could oversee the roof. Listen to this.
Representative Crane took a video on site yesterday. I'd like staff to put that up. It's just very short. There's a few seconds. They can do that. If I understand correctly, this is from the second-story window of the AGR building. You can see that window comes out from the sash and swings out to the right. There's an aerial photo right after Crooks was killed, where Crooks's body's on the roof, and that window was open. Was it from this vantage point that those ESU officers spotted Crooks?
I don't know that particular window, but my understanding is from a second-story window is where he was initially spotted.
Okay. So are you then saying that, to your knowledge, those ESU officers left the location where they could look out the window to go in search of this person?
That is my understanding.
So sometime before the time between the time he was spotted on the ground and identified as someone suspicious until the shooting, they had left that post to go look for him. Is that what you're saying?
My understanding is yes, along with other municipal officers that responded to that area. And that's based on interviews that we've conducted. And I want to be very clear that I don't want to establish a timeline minute by minute because we don't have that yet.
I think that's revelatory. I haven't heard that information. I did hear before that and there's a local news station. Well, there's a local news station report from July 17 that says that local law enforcement were told they couldn't be responsible for securing the AGR building during the Trump rally. And of course, you've testified a moment ago or earlier in this hearing that it was your understanding that the meeting with the Secret Service on the site was that ESU was going to handle the AGR building. Which is it? Do you know?
My understanding is what my initial answer was.
Okay. You also, in response to Mr. McCall, you started to say something. You were saying that you did have integrated comms, and you were saying you were deferring to the ongoing investigation, but you have an understanding of the sequence, and then he cut you off and went on to another question. Do you know what you were about to say? Do you remember that?
Just that we had members of PSP inside of the Secret Service command post, and we were maintaining communication with our people.
Had ESU maintained position in that window overlooking the roof, isn't it true that they would have had a clean shot at Mr. Crooks as he was ascending the roof to his shooting position?
I'm not prepared to say that because I don't know the exact timeline of events.
But it's your understanding, though, that they were no longer in that room where they had been previously overlooking the building at the time he was ascending the roof. Is that correct?
Could you repeat that question?
The ESU officers were no longer in that room where they could look out the window and oversee the roof as that video shows.
I believe they were actively searching along with additional municipal officers for Mr. Crooks.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My time's expired.
Let me interpret tongues for you guys so you can understand what he's. Again, this is authority covering their butts and being obscure when they need to be radically clear. He's saying we had two police officers positioned at this window where they could see what was going on. And it was from his second-story window, probably that window, where they got a picture of the suspicious guy. That's the picture you have, the aerial picture of this guy kind of crawling around. And what did they do? They left the window with the surveillance capacity they had for the roof and went down in search. wandering around. Now, catch this, in search of the shooter who was already on the roof, working his way, crawling up into position to shoot. In other words, they left the window and their vantage point in order to join a search. But there's some timeline. He's not going to, because the timeline is irrelevant. The timeline says you left the window when the shooter was getting in position. That's the kind of questioning which creates in people the anxiety that why would you leave the one critical vantage point where you could take out a sniper and leave it? Why would you do that? Because they were engaging and looking for the guy. That's the explanation. That's the way it is. All right, I'm going to take a break right now. We'll be right back. I want to take a moment to talk about the volatile financial time that we're in. And I want you to empower yourself with knowledge. My people perish for lack of knowledge, the Bible says. Visit lancewallnau.com/birch and get a free information kit. Consider discussing how to shift your 401k or your retirement account into a tax-sheltered gold and silver account. Why don't you go to lancewallnau.com/birch right now and take action for a secure future. You might have heard Speaker Mike Johnson is responding to this and indicating there's going to be a more thorough investigation going forward. It might console you to know that because a lot of people are saying we better get an investigation on the investigation. So go ahead and cut to video 4.
Our reaction, the immediate reaction to her resignation, is that it is overdue. She should have done this at least a week ago. I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to see that she has heeded the call of both Republicans and Democrats. Now we have to pick up the pieces. We have to rebuild the American people's faith and trust in the Secret Service as an agency. It has an incredibly important responsibility in protecting presidents, former presidents, and other officials in the executive branch. And we've got a lot of work to do. The task force that we'll be putting together is going to be very important. As I said, they have 3 responsibilities: to investigate what happened, the debacle that happened 2 Saturdays ago, to hold those accountable. It certainly was the director, Cheadle, but there may be others in the line of authority who are also culpable in what happened and the errors and mistakes there. And finally, to ensure that those mistakes do not happen again. The stakes are too high. It's a very dangerous time. We need the Secret Service to be acting to be performing at the top of their game, and we'll ensure that that happens. I hope that the interim director or whomever is appointed to replace Director Cheadle will be very sober-minded about the responsibility and take into account the very dangerous times in which we live. We'll do everything we can in the House to ensure that that's true, and I think our task force's work just got even more important.
Now, I know that a great many of you that are watching have so little confidence in the fact that this wasn't the Secret Service did its job. You believe it was an inside job. And so many, if I surveyed, over 65% or 70% would say it's an inside job. That's the state of our level of distrust. But I want you to watch this particular video now on the recreation of the trajectory of the shots, just because I think this is an argument that there may have been assistance given to this shooter. That's a question, is who was working with him. But it looks to me like there was a rush job on him shooting from one location. I'll explain why I think there was one shooter in a second. Take a look.
This video provides a detailed analysis of the trajectories of all the bullets in the Trump shooting incident and how they ultimately struck 3 innocent victims. It was a harrowing event. In the footage, you can see the 3 victims who were shot. 1 person died, and 2 others were injured. Let's have a moment of silence for the deceased. Now, we will reverse the footage to examine the true origin of the bullets. This is the location of the attacker, Thomas. To provide a clearer perspective, we placed a 10-foot diameter red disc as a reference. This represents the maximum range Thomas could aim under the given conditions. First, let's focus on the fatal first shot. This bullet passed through Trump's right ear, continued forward, grazed the left shoulder of one spectator, and then hit another spectator in the right abdomen. Fortunately, the person was standing. Had they been sitting, the bullet might have struck their head. When Trump was hit, he instinctively covered his ear with his hand and fell to the ground. More gunshots followed, with a total of approximately 7 to 8 bullets fired. Now, let's replay this scene at normal speed to take a look at what happened.
Take a look at what happened.
The spectator is the innocent victim who tragically lost their life. It appears the bullet hit a vital area. If it had been slightly off, the person might have survived. It's truly unfortunate.
All right, so what you're looking at there is the straight line of the shots with two people that were injured, one that was killed, Trump himself being in the trajectory of one of those bullets. The reason why I'm showing you that is because it lays out the fact that the bullet trajectory, boom, 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 was coming from one location. So the second shooter scenario, the water tower, and other scenarios would have had different angles. And that would complicate then the scenario of the one shooter fixed position argument. Now, the other part that's important is why the shooter did the shooting. And this is somewhere I think you need to be giving God the glory for how this was worked out, not just in the fact that Donald Trump strangely moved his head to go look at a chart, and in that 0.3 seconds of moving his head, he actually re-altered the trajectory of the bullet from the back of his skull to his ear. The reason why the shooting was done so sporadically and so quickly, and you heard the congressman saying that with 6 years experience, with 6 years time gap, he went back and had 98% accuracy in terms of hitting a target. Why was it that this shooter was not hitting the target? A policeman was looking to see if there was someone on the roof, got up on the shoulders of another policeman, pulled himself up as the shooter was going to position, turned around with his rifle facing the policeman. The policeman goes back down. At that moment, the shooter quickly drops down, and without having the opportunity to scope and do any other logistics, just shot, realizing he's been found out. Police are already on him. So he does the shooting, and that explains why the shooting within that 10-foot perimeter was straight lines in, hitting everybody based on that trajectory, but not accurate enough so as to take out the president. That interruption with the policeman was what caused the haste in the shooting. Now, we've already looked at the fact that he was on the roof, which could have been seen by two other policemen. They were not there. The sloped angle of the roof is a ridiculous, testimony there about the fact that we didn't have anybody on that roof protecting it because it was too dangerous. What you're hearing is a series of really bad policing stories going on, which of course feeds a narrative of surely they were in on it, but you'd have to get those two guys that were in the window there in the local Butler Police Department to have walked away on purpose. You'd have to have the guy that was climbing up on the roof doing it in such a way that he was without a ladder trying to get up there. There's a lot of factors here that play into the realization that your praying is what caused this concert of events to happen in sequence that saved the president's life. Sadly, it cost the life of a fireman and it injured two other people. But for our purposes, the question we might want to ask is something that came out and new information is coming out, which is if you do, like, how we did the Dinesh D'Souza following the, what do you call it when you geo-target a phone? Mm-hmm. That there evidently was like 9 devices that were being tracked in the house of the shooter, and that there was a, and we'll have to verify this, but we just did this in a show earlier with Katie Souza, that the digital footprint of Washington, D.C., near the FBI office has a trace that's going from the FBI office up to the I guess the shooter's device, mm-hmm. and that the ammunition that was used was evidently from a Washington, ammunition source, which is going to have to be explained. The point is, there are independent people like us that are now going in there, hovering over this and saying, let's check every device that this kid had and see where it went and if there was any traffic from D.C. to him that took place. And evidently there's a connection there. And that's a story which is absolutely worth verifying and checking out. So, Mercedes, where would you say we are on the index of conspiracy with people assisting him? How did the rifle get there? Because it was planted previously and nobody found it, where this kid had done 2 site visits and a drone visit. So evidently he knew how to, hide a ladder? Where did the ladder come from? I think there was a report that he went to Home Depot that day to get a ladder. Well, how did the ladder get through?
Yeah.
Where was the ladder position? You don't hear everybody talking about that. I'm surprised. And where was the rifle hidden? Because he didn't go through the gate and get there to the event with a rifle, obviously, but he had a rifle there. How did that get positioned? The ammunition or the explosives that were in a van nearby. He had a second device. He's got 3 encrypted accounts, evidently. Why were they encrypted and where did they go? Those are the unanswered questions. You certainly aren't going to get any level of clarity from this crew that's in Washington, all covering their butts and talking about how their departments are doing their job.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, exactly that. I mean, how are you supposed to get answers from anybody? I mean, it's a lot of Congress people getting their soundbite in, but who's really accountable? Who is the person that should have owned this? And is it this, is it Cheadle, the lady who was in charge of Secret Service? I mean, obviously Secret Service should have owned it, but it just, you remember, in the Bible, Lance, where, David ends up he ends up killing Bathsheba's husband by just withdrawing support, by withdrawing protection. And if anything, it feels like that. It's like, just put the most inept people out there. Don't have them communicate amongst each other. Don't do a proper site visit. This guy was allowed to fly a drone. Somehow he climbed up on a roof. There's so many questions, and I do think the timeline matters, and that's what a lot of the questioning's been about this week, of what exactly happened leading up to this. But it just reeks of conspiracy, and I don't like that, because I feel like we just constantly live in the what if world. And did you hear this? So anyways, I'm looking forward to the truth coming out.
And I'm just going to say again, I think we need to realize that God intervened both in the interruption of the shooter and in Trump's moving of his head, and that it gives me, and it also gives me confidence that they're under such scrutiny now that if there is an attempt on Trump, the Secret Service and the police are under a microscope in how they're managing his events. So we're going to be staying on top of this because there's an awful lot of information coming out. I want to cover what's going on with the Harris emergence and coronation, and the fact that even AOC is admitting and revealing the fact that, hey, this isn't with everybody's advice and consent. This is an inside coup going on, but we're going to have to cover that in another segment. You don't want to miss, on these days, any episode of the Lance Wallnau Show, because we're covering this stuff live with information and I would say with a certain degree of prophetic perspective on how this fits in the great unfolding drama of America in the election 2024. Be seeing you again on our next broadcast.
Did you enjoy this latest episode? Please remember to share it with your friends, because the more knowledge you have, the better equipped you are to navigate the world.